week 2, looking at elders and overseers. So we're going to spend 2 weeks on that. And then I'll be gone for a couple weeks, and then for a couple Wednesday nights. Of course, we're meeting next week on Tuesday, just to make sure everybody remembers that. Because I'm going to be leaving Wednesday to go up to Greenville. I'm going to be traveling like crazy. Greenville, come back, go to Orlando, jump on a plane, fly to London, or fly to New York, from New York to London. So, and then, we need a vacation when I get back. But anyway, so and then we'll get into some of the other, like the deacons and, some other aspects of leadership and so forth. Okay, so let's look at elders and deacons. Let's start with just looking at 1 Timothy. Got to grab a Bible. All right, so 1 Timothy. So where are we supposed to be this week? We're supposed to be in chapter 3, right? 1 Timothy 3, verses 1 through 7. Keep passing it. Ugh. I have that problem with those little books. Okay. Everybody there?
Yes.
All right. So it says, the saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to the office of overseer, he desires a noble task. Therefore, an overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not a drunkard, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own household well, with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become puffed up with conceit and fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders, so that he may not fall into disgrace, into a snare of the devil. Okay, and let's see. So we'll start there. We're going to look at the Old Testament background of elders. So Paul's given us qualifications for elders, but before we really dive into the qualifications, what I want to do is explore where this office came from. What is the basis for it? So it really has its roots in the Old Testament, Exodus 18, 13 through 23. So let's look there and see if someone would volunteer to read that.
The next day Moses sat to judge the people. The people stood around Moses from morning till evening. When Moses' father-in-law saw that what he was doing for the people, he said, "What is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone and all the people stand around you from morning till evening?" And Moses said to his father-in-law, "Because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide between one person and another, and I make them know the statutes of God and his laws." Moses' father-in-law said to him, "What are you doing is not good. You and the people with you certainly wear yourselves out, for this thing is too heavy for you. You are not able to do it alone. Now obey my voice. I will give you advice, and God be with you. You shall represent the people before God and bring their cases to God. You shall warn them about the statutes and the laws, and make them know the way in which they must walk and what they must do. Moreover, look for able men from all the people who fear God, who are trustworthy, who hate a bribe, and place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and tens. And let them judge the people at all times. Every great matter they shall bring to you, but any small matter they shall decide themselves. So it will be easy for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this, God will direct you. You will be able to endure, and all this people also will go to their place in peace."
Okay, right. So Moses could not do it alone, and there was many times throughout Scripture where he definitely felt very alone and was wondering, what did I get myself into here? Dealing with these people, your people, Lord. They're your people. I didn't give birth to these people. He was just very overwhelmed at times, and you can see that as you read through the Scriptures there. But his father-in-law gave him some really good advice, didn't he? He says, you can't do this alone, Moses. You need able men. And not just like one or two, right? He needed a plurality. And that's really what I wanted to get at. It was he needed a plurality of able men to help him shoulder the burden of leading the people. Okay? And then Numbers 11. Someone want to look that up and read that? Numbers 11.
Starting 16, and the Lord said to Moses, gather for me 70 men from the elders of Israel, whom you know are elders of the people, and their officials. Take them to the tent of the assembly, and they will stand there with you. I will come down and speak with you there. I will take away from the spirit that is on you, and I will place it on them, and they will bear the burdens of the people with you. You will not bear it alone. Skip down to 24.
Mm-hmm.
So Moses went out, and he spoke the words of Yahweh to the people, and he gathered together 70 men from the elders of the people, and he made them stand all around the tent. Then Yahweh went down in the cloud, spoke to him, and he took away the spirit that was on them, and he put it on the 70 elders. And as soon as the spirit was resting on them, they prophesied. But they did not do it again.
Okay, good. All right. So once again, we see now, out of like some of these men that have been, kind of pointed to like sort of be judges and things like that, 70 of those men have now been anointed, even more set apart than they were before, to help shoulder the burden with Moses. So he puts, this is one of those times when Moses is like, and God says, okay, I'm going to put my spirit, take some of the spirit off of you, put it on these 70 elders. Again, we have a plurality, right? We have men set apart, okay, in order to share the burden. Okay, and then look at Joshua 24:1.
Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem and summoned the elders, the heads, the judges, and the officers of Israel, and they presented themselves before God.
Okay, so what this turns into is these elders, these leaders, become elders of the towns and elders of the congregations, and eventually it turns into something like when you start having synagogues in different places, you've got elders in the synagogues. That's kind of where it all gets going, and these men were responsible for leading the community of the people. So you see them all gathering together there in Joshua 24:1. Now, let's talk for a minute about what's at stake. What's at stake when we don't have adequate leadership? So let's look at Judges 2:7-10. We're just doing a march right through the Old Testament here, aren't we? So it says there, Joshua 2:7-10, and the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great work that the Lord had done for Israel. And Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110, and they buried him within the boundaries of his inheritance in Timnath-Heres, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of the mountain of Gash. And all of that generation also were gathered to their fathers. And there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel. So as long as those elders were still there, the people pretty much served the Lord, right, even after Joshua died. So they continued to do their job in that regard. But what did they not do?
Pass it on.
They didn't pass it on. And how do you pass it on? Replace yourself, right? Yeah, live it, teach it, all that. That's right. But you replace yourself. You got to replace yourself because hey, these guys are going to die out. So we've got to have able men who are going to do the same thing that these men were doing, right? So they need to find who's going to succeed them as elders in Israel. So that's what's at stake, and and of course Paul does deal with this with Timothy, 2 Timothy 1:4. So now we're jumping way ahead. Several hundreds of years to 2 Timothy 1:14, and he tells him there, he says, by the Holy Spirit who dwells within us, guard the good deposit entrusted to you. So how do you do that? How do you guard the good deposit? What does that mean? Do we wrap it in a napkin and bury it in the sand? Is that how we guard it? right? So you kind of saw that where that was coming, right? Matthew 25, right? That's the parable of the talents, right? So Matthew 25. Of course, Jesus tells this parable of this Matthew 25:14. Somebody have it? If you have it, go ahead and start reading.
For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted them to his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here, I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also, who had the 2 talents, came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also had received the 1 talent, came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gathered where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own interest. So take the talent. I'm sorry, I got the wrong page. So take the talent from him and give it to those who has 10 talents. For everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness, in the place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Okay, right. So I think I said there's a little bit of a parallel there when Paul tells Timothy to guard the deposit, entrust it into him, right? And he'll later go on and talk about how he needs to entrust this faith into other men, into other people who can continue to teach others, right? To pass it along, to grow, to multiply. So think of it as a return on investment. Certainly he doesn't want Timothy to keep it to himself, right? And he certainly does want him to guard his heart, to be watchful of his heart, that he doesn't lose the deposit in that way too. That's also in mind there, of course. But Timothy is to pass it along. Timothy is to multiply. Timothy is to invest in others. Ultimately, that is the best way of guarding it. And in 2 Timothy 2:2, though, let's go back to 2 Timothy. Sorry, we're flipping everywhere today.
And what you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men who will be able to reach others also.
There you go. See? Boom. So that's what Timothy's supposed to do. That's what he's being charged to do. That's his calling, is to essentially replace himself, to build up and train up other men who are faithful men who can he can entrust this teaching, this body of this corpus of doctrine to. Now, the elders in Joshua's day, you see, failed to do that. The elders in Joshua's day did not invest in an upcoming generation and teach it to them like they were supposed to, so that within one generation, the Lord was forgotten. The next generation comes up and they're like, Lord who? Yahweh who? We heard something, about some God that our fathers worship, but we don't really know anything about him. Because no one told us, no one taught us, no one And so we don't want to make that mistake. And Paul does not want Timothy to make that mistake. So now you also so we're going to be looking at Acts 14 and Acts 15 here next. So Acts 14.
When they had appointed elders for them in every church with prayer and fasting, they committed them to the Lord in whom they had believed.
Okay, now it's interesting because Paul was very quick to appoint elders in each local church when he and his team would go into a city and establish a church. They would, they'd get people worshiping, they'd get them to coming together for prayer and for study of the Word, and then they'd go into the next town, and then they start coming back. And in a relatively short period of time, they would be looking for the most mature, most godly, the ones that had grown the most, the ones that seemed to be had the most stable of them to serve as elders. They would appoint them as elders, make them elders of those churches. And so there was a sense of somewhat of a sense of urgency there with that, because I think Paul recognized, as he will go on to say to the Ephesian elders in Acts 20, about the importance of guarding the flock. That there needs to be, men in place, shepherds in place who will protect the flock. And so they wanted to get those men in place as soon as possible and give them that commission, of course, prepare them as much as possible, and get them in place so that they could do that work. And then Acts 15, what do we see in Acts 15? This is the Great Jerusalem Council. In Acts 15, we see, just one chapter up there, Paul and Barnabas go to Jerusalem because of this controversy about circumcision and about the customs of Moses and so forth. And then so Paul and Barnabas are sent off by the church to Jerusalem to go ask about this question. And it says, let's see. So in verse 2, and after Paul and Barnabas had no small dissension and debate with them, Paul and Barnabas and some of the others were appointed to go up to Jerusalem to the apostles and the elders about this question. So being sent on their way by the church, they passed through both Phoenicia and Samaria, describing in detail the conversion of the Gentiles, and brought great joy to all the brothers. So when they came to Jerusalem, they were welcomed by the church and the apostles and the elders, and they declared all that God had done with them. And then verse 6, apostles and elders were gathered together to consider this matter. So what does that show us there? That already, here by Acts 15, you've got apostles and elders working side by side, working together to decide these matters, and a very controversial issue. The elders are right there, right next to the apostles. It's not like the apostles just sitting like on some little, like these little thrones or something, above the elders down here, and they're like, we're going to tell you what to do, right? They're actually participating in the process as almost like co-equals in a sense, right? Now, granted, they're apostles, and they know that, but they remember what Jesus said, which we looked at last week, about lording over people. They're not doing that. They're very careful about not doing that, and they also recognize that these elders, this is going to be a perpetual office. This is going to continue while they die out, after they die out. And the elders are going to be given the responsibility of preserving that body of teaching and carrying it on, passing it along. So technically, true apostolic succession is in the eldership, not in the papacy. So that's really where it is, and you contend for the faith once for all, entrusted to the saints. Right? That's what Jude says, and that's essentially what their job is to do: is to safeguard it, to guard that deposit, and to protect it, to protect its purity, to pass it along, to multiply. That's the idea. Okay, so I've always just found that very, very interesting. Here you have apostles and elders already, a plurality of elders in place overseeing the Jerusalem church. And who is the senior pastor of this church? Who is the senior pastor of this church?
Jerusalem? Peter?
James, right. James the apostle? No.
Brother of Jesus.
Brother of Jesus, that's right. That's right. Because James the apostle has already been killed. He's dead. He was killed a few chapters back by Herod. So he was like the first one of the apostles of this. So now James, the brother of the Lord, one of the brothers who didn't believe, like we read in John 7, even his brothers didn't believe him. Well, now he's a believer, and he is actually presiding over this assembly. Not because he's Jesus' brother. Oh, this is the Lord's brother, so we got to put him and make him the senior pastor, right? No, that's not really what it's about. See, he's just a regular old human being like the rest of us. What's that?
He's got connections.
He's got connections, right. Yeah, he's my bro. He's got a red phone. Everyone else has just got a regular old black phone, right? Yeah. So no, but he is in that position as just a normal man, as an elder. That's the position he's in. So I just find that so fascinating. So that's kind of the background, the Old Testament background of the plurality of elders, the need for elders, and what's at stake. Okay, and what's at stake is we don't want to repeat what we see in Judges. Okay, hence that's why we're doing this, why we're having these classes, is because it's very important. It's a big part of my job, my role, my calling is to train up other men. And the other elders too of doing that as well.
It's our job to keep you in line.
Right, that's right. That's right, keep me in line.
Because he's not the brother of Jesus.
That's right, because the brother of Jesus, he would have no issues. He was practically sinless, despite his early unbelief. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so that's what we're looking at now. Of course, I think every man should be encouraged to pursue this. Now, does that mean every man will reach the qualifications that he lists here in verses 1 through 7 of 1 Timothy 3? And of course, no, right? But one of the things that I think we make a mistake of is we think, okay, well, Paul lists these qualifications. This is like the super Christian, right? We're looking for the super Christians, right? So if you're not aspiring to the office of elder, then you don't have to try to reach these bars, right? That's not the point, right? Okay, what he's saying is this is the regular goal, the bar, that you're supposed to be trying to reach, that every Christian is supposed to be trying to reach, and the ones that are to be put into office are the ones that have. Okay, that's essentially what he's saying here. Okay, and I'll say this now and I'll say it again. It's not calling for perfection either. Because if it was, guess what? There wouldn't be any. That's right. And we'll get into that a little more. But first, okay, so you notice then that in 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 7, okay, what's the word he uses there for to refer to elders? Overseer, okay. And is that the same thing as an elder? You believe it is. Some people don't, right? So our Episcopal friends and Anglican friends and Catholic friends think that, and Lutheran friends think that these are different offices. They think,
Bishop.
Right, because the word is episkopos. The Greek word episkopos is translated as overseer or bishop. And then the word elder is translated from presbyteros. So this is where these crazy names come from for these denominations, right? Like Presbyterian, what does that mean? Episcopal, what is that? So, and they're just really, all they are is just words that describe the kind of church government that we have. That's essentially what these mean. So the Greek word for overseer, episkopos, elder, presbyteros. So there's been debate for centuries. Books have been written, dissertations have been written about this, and our position is that overseer and elder are one and the same. These are just two words describing the same office, and there's a reason for that, which I'll get into in just a minute. But I just do want to very briefly mention that there are Presbyterians who hold to what is called a three-office view. Okay, so we are a two-office church, essentially or officially. Okay, meaning the office of elder and the office of deacon. In the office of elder, there's two classes of elder. There's the teaching and then the ruling, okay? But there are some Presbyterians, including one of my former pastors, who holds to a three-office view, that the overseer or the episkopos, okay, the bishop, is technically the pastor. And even though the overseer is technically also an elder, the elders are not necessarily overseers. That makes sense? It's almost like a separate category. So they would say there's bishop, elder, and deacon. So that would be the three offices. Okay, so if you ever run into that, someone says, you two office, three office. Okay.
Of course, then you have a problem with, there's something missing from 1 Timothy 3 then.
Right. Yeah. Right. So where's the elder qualifications?
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. And also they're used interchangeably. That's the other reason why we would say that it's a two office. Paul uses them interchangeably. So look at Titus 1, 5, and 7. So he says, "This is why I left you in Crete, so that you might put what remained in order and appoint elders in every town as I directed you." There's that whole thing with appointing elders again. And then he goes into the qualifications. That anyone's above reproach, husband, one wife, children of believers, not open to the charge of debauchery or insubordination. Verse 7, for an overseer. Oh, he just switched words on us. Yeah. As God's steward, must be above reproach. So he's talking about one and the same. Elders and overseers, right? Okay, and also if you compare the requirements, they're really the same. And then 1 Peter 5, doing a lot of jumping around tonight. Sorry, it's like I feel like we're doing what is it? Like some sort of like Bible passage race thing, like you should do in like Sunday school. Okay, see who can turn there faster. And how the kids are flipping through, tearing the pages up. All right, so 1 Peter 5, Peter says, "So I exhort the elders among you as a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, as well as a partaker in the glory that is to be revealed. Shepherd the flock of God that is among you, exercising oversight," there's that word, "not under compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you, not for shameful gain, but eagerly, not domineering over those in your charge, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory." What do elders do? They exercise oversight. Overseers. Right? That's what they do. It's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. Yeah. Acts 20. Let's go there. This is one of my favorite passages on in any kind of discussion about the eldership is Acts 20. And partly is because of the intensity of Paul's emotions in this passage as he pleads with the Ephesian elders. So there in verse 17, verse 18, 17 it says, "So from Miletus he sent to Ephesus and called the elders of the church to come to him. And when they came to him, he said to them, 'You yourselves know how I lived among you the whole time, from the first day that I set foot in Asia, serving the Lord with all humility, with tears, with trials that happened to me through the plots of the Jews, and how I did not shrink from declaring to you anything that was profitable, and teaching you in public and from house to house, testifying both to Jews and to Greeks of repentance towards God and faith in our Lord Jesus Christ. Now, behold, I'm going to Jerusalem, constrained by the Spirit, not knowing what will happen to me there, except that the Holy Spirit testifies to me that every city, that imprisonment and affliction await me.'" Let's see. Let's jump down to verse 25. "And now, behold, I know that none of you among whom I have gone about proclaiming the kingdom will see my face again. Therefore, I testify to you this day, I am innocent of the blood of all. I did not shrink from declaring to you the whole counsel of God." Verse 28, "Be careful, pay careful attention to yourselves and to all the flock in which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers." I mean, it's like, duh. This is pretty clear, right? That's right. He made the elders overseers, and that they are to care for the church of God, which he obtained with his own blood. "I know that after my departure, fierce wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock. And from among your own selves will rise men speaking twisted things to draw away the disciples after them. Therefore be alert, remembering that for 3 years I did not cease night or day to admonish everyone with tears." So we'll stop there for a minute. But so I think you get the point, right? Elders oversee, okay? And that's part of what I would say is their shepherding ministry, okay? That's essentially what a shepherd does. And that's one of the metaphors the Scripture uses for elder. That's what Peter said. That's what Paul said here. Shepherd the flock, right? warning them about the ferocious wolves. Pay careful attention to the flock, actually, is specifically what he says there. And which implying what? That they're shepherds. And they have oversight of the sheep, of the flock. Peter, of course, goes a little further to say, kind of describe them as under-shepherds of Christ. And did you notice, too, how he addresses them? Did you notice what he said? Back to 1 Peter 5 for a second. I exhort you as a fellow elder, he says. Isn't that interesting? As a fellow elder. He doesn't say, I exhort you as the Apostle Peter. I am the rock upon which Christ is building his church. I exhort you as a fellow elder. I'm just one of you guys. And I'm saying this to you as a fellow elder, as people on the same level here. It's so fascinating to see him do that. And you see what we saw in Acts 15. This is now carried over into Peter's epistle. That same mindset of, hey, we're raising up our replacements, essentially. That's what the apostles, that's how they saw it. We're raising up our replacements. These guys are going to take the torch, continue to run the race that has started here, with us. So they have oversight. Overseers watch over God's people as a shepherd watches over the sheep. The two terms describe one office. So that describes the office, which doesn't really get into the qualifications quite yet. We're getting there. That's where we're going next. So what do we know about the qualifications then? But first, before we jump into that, any other comments or questions about what we've already looked at there, as far as the offices or anything about that? All right. So when we talk about it being an office, do we understand what we're talking about there? It's kind of like the office of the president. Okay. So when the president is in office, right, he is endowed with a certain kind of authority, his position that is given to him through the Constitution, right, and ultimately by God as well. So similar kind of thing, okay? They are put in an office, okay, in a similar way as, kind of clothed with a certain type of authority. Not that they have authority within of themselves, okay? It's like once the president leaves office, that authority's gone, right? He doesn't have it anymore. He can't just be like, hey, Army, Navy, go get him, He can't. He's not commander-in-chief anymore. He doesn't have that authority anymore, so he can lose that authority. It's not something that he's born with. It's not in his DNA or anything. And the same thing with elders. They can have it taken away as well. But the word is the basis of their authority. And they have been called of God to exercise that role. All right. So let's first look at 1 Timothy 2. We're going to go back to 1 Timothy 2 for a second here. Someone read 12 through 15 for us, please.
I do not permit a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man. Rather, she is to remain quiet. For Adam was formed first, then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and became a transgressor.
A lot of what's in the Bible is inerrant, foundational truth. Christ died for our sins. I'll go to the mat on that one.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it is culture, back in the nomadic and early city building days. So what's to say this is just a cultural thing? Because he says women must wear hats too. If you read
Okay,
it,
right,
Women must wear hats.
right,
Women
right.
don't wear
Yeah.
hats.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so is it more like that?
Sure.
What makes it an inerrant truth? I guess I want to hear what
Fair question. So even the cultural things, okay, are based on some sort of inerrant truth that's being upheld, okay? And the reason, so what we see here, though, is that he must be a man.
Mm-hmm.
The gender of elders ought to be men. And why is that? Because of what he says about Adam and Eve there in verse 13. Adam was formed first, then Eve. Okay? And Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and became a transgressor. So what he's saying there is that the creation order is where that comes from. It's not just a cultural thing. It goes all the way back to the institution, all the way back to the beginning. So that's why. Now, when it comes to like the head head coverings and things like that. Like in Corinthians, it talks about all that. A lot of that, and that's a tough passage. I preached to that a couple years ago through 1 Corinthians, and as far as like being quiet, being silent in church and that kind of thing. Knowing the context is also helpful because the thought is that there were some contentious women who were arguing. And so he's telling them they need to be quiet. And if they got questions, they could ask their husbands at home. There was also some confusion over how people were dressing. And basically when he says that men shouldn't have long hair, or that women should have their head covered, he's basically saying men should look like men and women should look like women. That's the core issue there. So how that translates into various cultures might look different, but the core principle is the same, right? Men should look like men, women should look like women. So that's my take on it.
Roles. If you read in here really carefully, you'll see that he's describing roles.
Yes.
And so he's not saying that one is greater than another.
Right.
He is saying, it's just like Jesus said, can a servant be greater than his master?
No.
Okay, or in the case, can a son be greater than his father? Which was the big controversy when, talking about the psalm that Jesus quoted. Was it Psalm 33?
Yeah, the Lord said to my Lord, said to my right hand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So because the whole understanding
Right.
is that the son can't be greater than the father. So there's a role that comes from who comes first.
Right.
It's nothing other than that.
Right.
Who came first? Adam came first. So then Eve was to submit in the sense of get her leadership from Adam.
Right. Right.
And of course, Adam has to submit to God because God comes first.
Right.
And so
Exactly.
it's the
Yeah.
order of creation is a reflection of the order of the role,
Right.
who takes the leadership. And so then that's why, and it talks about the woman's role
Yeah.
is childbearing in this particular case. That's not the only thing she's good for, but it's obviously, let's clarify here. The point is that she has a role.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the point, but then the children are under her.
Right.
It's not just that she brings them forth and then lets them run around wild.
Right.
That she has a role as
Yes.
the mother.
Right. Right. Right.
To those who are children.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's about order of creation, or is reflective
Mhm.
of their role.
Right.
That's really what he's trying to say.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
I think this is so important because I personally believe nothing has split the Christian church
Mhm.
more than this issue. I mean, you talk about gays and what you want.
in recent days,
small
yeah.
fraction
Yeah.
of the population.
Mhm.
This is 50% and 50%,
Mhm.
and we're gonna add, and half the churches allow women ministers,
Mhm.
as you know, and women deacons
Sure.
and elders, and half the churches, including my E-Free church, that I believe so much in their beliefs, only allows men to be elders
Mhm.
and ministers for the same reasons you just.
Yeah. And it has now. Granted, I will say that it has been used to demean women. I mean, I think that has happened, but that doesn't mean okay. Well, if that's happened, then obviously we got to change this, right? We have to come to a more biblical understanding. There are things, okay, like in Titus 2, he'll go in to say that that women, the older women specifically, have a role in teaching the younger women. That is something that I can't really do effectively. And so it's a matter of, okay, the way I heard it described one time, it's not the best analogy, but you don't hammer nails with a teacup, and you don't drink tea out of a hammer, right? They have a purpose. It's kind of along the lines of what you were saying. There is a it's just like even the body of Christ. They got the hand, the eye, the ear. The whole body can't be eyes. The whole, you can't just have a big blob of eyes. You can't have a big, blob of hands. You've got to have all the different parts. And it's a very similar, setup in terms of just male and female, right? They were to work together, complement one another. We're complementary. That's kind of our position. So there's definitely, ministries that women have in the church that men really are just no good at. Really don't have any business trying to, like teaching the younger women, that sort of thing. So it's a matter of just understanding, like you said, the order of God, how God has established things, right? Yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah, good. Yeah, great question. All right, anybody else? I know this is a hairy issue, so, hey, make sure we cover it. I think we're all kind of like, yeah, we're there.
God created Adam from the dust of the earth. God created Eve from Adam's rib.
Right.
And that's a difference right there in the act of creation on this board.
Right. Yep. Very good. Yep. Okay, so moving on. So from this passage, though, we do see that if teaching, the general kind of like role of teaching the church, okay, is kind of what's in mind here. Not that there isn't other types of teaching that can take place in different areas, like the older women teaching the younger women. That generally speaking, he is to be a man and not a woman.
I'm sorry,
You're
because
fine.
we had Lindsay here this week,
Mm-hmm.
and she was telling her experiences, but she was teaching too, and in the sense of,
Right. Yeah.
And I felt privileged
Mhm.
to have heard her.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think that this passage, properly interpreted, would prohibit her from
Yes.
from teaching.
I agree.
That.
I agree.
So we have to be very careful how we say there's never a time when a woman could ever teach a man anything,
Yes.
anywhere.
Right.
So
Right. That's not what Paul's saying. I don't believe that's what he's
I don't
saying.
think so.
He's talking about the official positions of being in authority and that sort of
We don't
thing.
get taught at home, don't we?
Yeah, that's right. My wife teaches me all the time, trust me.
I don't mean that sarcastically.
Yeah. I learn a lot from her. Yeah, absolutely. So is that somehow a violation of that? No, I don't think so. And I was wondering about that too. I was thinking about that. I was like, someone would, I can see somebody saying, she's up there teaching, but the nature of it was, very different. And there's been discussions like, well, can a woman teach Sunday school? Can she teach a Sunday school class? We've had questions about Bible study, about small group. Can women, can they sort of just lead the discussion? Is that a teaching role?
I think I asked that one time.
Yeah.
Just wanted to know where we
Yeah.
church position
Yeah.
was.
Let's see, where are we at? Okay, so then the first thing he says in 1 Timothy 3 is if anyone aspires to the office of overseer, he desires a noble task. Therefore, an overseer must be above reproach, and the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach. So let's just take verse 2 there. So above reproach. So what does that mean? And how does that hit you when you first hear it?
Leaves me out.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're not going to read about something in the newspaper
Right.
about this guy.
Right. Right.
I think it's really a civic. I think it's going to
Yeah.
a civic moral uprightness.
Mhm.
Not that there's no sin in this guy.
Right.
It's something that,
Right.
like I said, you wouldn't want to be on the 6 o'clock news.
Right. Skeletons in the closet that,
You know.
yeah, living a double life, that sort of thing. And really, I mean, like, no major, like you said, criminal activity, moral failure, things like that. I mean, I think, certainly, like, pastor runs off with the church secretary type news. It certainly would be that kind of stuff, that we're talking about. But yeah, certainly doesn't mean when it says above reproach, perfect, sinless, because that that certainly would leave all of us out for sure. But yeah, essentially, there's no hidden dirt, no unexposed, undealt with sin, not living a double life. Not to say that he's conquered every sin in his life, but that he's he's dealing with it appropriately. And so you have to ask those certain questions, I think, whenever someone's being looked at for this position for an elder. It does not mean, again, that he's perfect or has become sanctified to the point that he no longer struggles with sin in his life. But it does mean that he ought to have made great strides in holiness, though, too, right? Not it should be evident to others that he has grown, that he has made progress in holiness, right? That he's not just as like the first day he became a Christian, he hasn't really grown, and that happens sometimes, where people they grow a little bit, but kind of like when Paul says, to the Corinthians, I couldn't address you as a spirit, as I had to address you as babes because you needed milk, not solid food. They should have grown beyond where they actually were. So that does need to be considered. I think that's part of that.
When you read something on Facebook and you go, I don't know, that just doesn't pass the smell test. I got to go check and see if this is really real. I think that's the way we're supposed to live our lives.
Yeah.
Others.
Yeah.
If somebody was to say something, what?
I've never heard that before.
The smell test.
Smell test.
Yeah.
It just doesn't.
Right.
Something's
Something's off.
triggering me to think that there's something not right here. In the sense that so I'm not saying that you're perfect, but that people know enough of your character to believe that doesn't fit with who I know.
Yeah. Right.
What about the husband of one wife?
Yeah, we'll get there.
Okay.
We'll get there. Yeah.
I'm already there.
Hmm?
At the top of the page, I didn't fill in the two blanks.
Oh.
Uh-oh, you didn't.
The husband of one wife, literally what?
Oh, okay.
Oh, you know what? I actually skipped over by mistake. I didn't mean to do that. Yeah. Okay, let's go back. Well, you know what I did? I discussed that, and then I had that first, and it really should have been second. So I got it all reversed. I didn't even mean to do that. Okay, husband of one wife. So what does that mean? Okay, literally in the Greek, it's the man of one woman. The man of one woman. Okay? Some will say, some believe that this is saying that a person could not be divorced. Okay? That if he was ever divorced and remarried, then that means he's not a man of one woman. He had two women. See? Now, but that would be true even if his wife deceased. She died. He'd still, So, and there's a lot of. I actually heard, interestingly enough, when I was studying 1 Corinthians on divorce, a theory that Paul himself had been divorced. And the reason they said that, it was because someone in his position would have been very unusual for a Pharisee to not be married. And, highly unusual.
I've heard that before.
Have you heard that before?
Yeah.
So there was a theory that, it's possible that his wife left him because of his conversion.
Maybe she just died.
Or she could have just died. That's possible too. That's all speculation, So don't.
But he does say.
I'm not saying I believe that, but
He does say you should be like me and not have a woman. But if you're weak and want to get married, well, go ahead.
That's right.
Just
Yeah.
take the.
But know what I think. I think you're weak. Thanks, Paul.
It sounds like a guy who said.
I was paraphrasing.
Yeah. So some have that position though, and
Better off.
that's not my position.
I was told that when I was young.
Yeah.
I think I was in my 20s. I was at a church I was going to, and that's what I said. Something I was thinking about going into the ministry, and that came up. Well, you're going to have a hard time because you're divorced.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Plus the Baptists, right?
This was a sinful
Some Baptists,
Church of Christ.
Church of Christ, yeah.
Like my grandfather's ordained music minister in the Southern Baptist Convention, but he can't be I think there was at some point he was looking at becoming a pastor, and they said you can't because you've been divorced.
Right, yeah.
I'm just curious what.
Yeah, in the PCA, because we have the Westminster Confession, we did deal with that in the Westminster Confession class as well, about divorce and what it says, and that's pretty much where the PCA stands. That's what it says. The question is, were there biblical grounds? Because there are biblical grounds. Paul mentions that as well, so if that's the case, then okay. Well, then what is it? What can this really mean then? I think it's more than just divorce, because you can have someone who's never been divorced who doesn't meet this qualification, okay? And that's why I think it's dangerous to narrow it down so much, where that's the only thing we mean by that. No. I think there's more to it than that.
That would eliminate anybody that wasn't married, right? If you take it literally.
Well, yeah, that's right. That's right. And if Paul was
Must be
never
the
married,
husband
then he
of
didn't
one wife.
qualify
You
either.
don't have a wife.
Right.
Well, then you're not the husband of one wife.
Right. Right. Whose children are obedient. Okay. Well, me and my wife couldn't have kids. Oh, well, I guess you can't be an elder. Well, hold on a second. Say that he's given these general, standards for what kind of person you're looking for, right? And so, what are we looking for in how this man relates to women? I think is really the bigger picture. He's to be committed to one woman exclusively. So I think it has more to. This is my take on it. It's more to do with where he's at now, not what his past was. But where is he at now? I mean, he maybe he was like womanizing fool. Papa was a Rolling Stone, right? And so he was with lots of women. He comes to Christ, right? Now he's going to be committed. So, now some would say, well, okay, well, if it was before Christ, then, but there's so many different, issues balled up into that, as far as why a divorce would happen and that sort of thing. And I think also it does bring into question the matter of what he thinks about marriage. So his relationship to his wife currently, what his position on marriage is. Does he think marriage is just this thing where I can just jump in and out? As soon as the going gets tough, I'm out of there. I'm going to bail. I'm going to find some other, jump into some other relationship that's a little less tension. That matters. That's important as well. What is his, how he treats his wife? I think is huge part of that. And it also, certainly the grounds of his divorce ought to be examined. I have some very dear friends who I know are believers, and yet, I mean, some of them have been married 3-4 times, and and I mean, they're not aspiring to the office, but if they did, I'd have to say, there's something wrong here, and that would have to be looked at pretty closely, as it should for any divorce. Okay, anyone who is, the question needs to be asked. Tell me about what happened, because it could be that they are disqualified on the basis of this, depending on the grounds, on the circumstances. So you got to take it case by case, is what I'm saying.
I mean, this is written kind of in a present tense kind of form.
Yes, that's a good point.
As where is he now?
Right.
Right. Solomon and David both would be disqualified.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
they should have been.
Right.
And they should have been.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
And they weren't divorced, by the way.
No,
They just had lots.
they're just polygamists. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
So I mean, so the scenario you didn't bring up is what about the guy who's got a wife and about 3 women on the side? He's not divorced.
He's not divorced, right? Yeah, exactly.
So then, what about the man
So
who
you-
has a wife and he's addicted to pornography?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That's why I think all of those things are in view in that, right? Because if you narrow it down to one thing, then there's a lot of things that get left out. So I think it's a broader view of how his relationship with his wife, how he views women, and I've said this before when I was preaching through this stuff before. Hey ladies, does the guy creep you out? Don't nominate him to be an elder. If he's just, kind of like you feel like he's staring at you, checking you out, that's a problem. So yeah, and then polygamy was another possible interpretation that some people said, no, it's just talking about polygamy. He just can't have 2 wives or 4 wives or whatever, So,
Literally one at a time rather than the husband of one.
Right. Yeah. So, okay. And, so the man of one woman also speaks about his character and reputation. If he's flirtatious, if he's, just not guarding his steps around other women, that kind of thing. That all these things speak to his character. And that's really what we're after, is the character of the man. That's what we want to know, what we want to see, right? Is the character of the man. All right. So did you fill in all your blanks, Walt?
Yes, sir.
Good. All right. So then we already did above reproach. And then sober-minded and self-controlled. Now, both words refer to his general behavior and mindset. Is his thinking deranged or twisted, erratic behavior, inappropriate behavior? Is he impulsive? Does he demonstrate restraint? Anger issues. Yeah, right. Yeah, and that goes, and he'll also say not violent but gentle later. Yeah, I mean, they overlap. A lot of this overlaps. There's a lot of overlap here. I mean, self-control goes into his use of alcohol as well as how he manages his house, or how he uses his money. All those things are all part of being self-controlled and sober-minded. Respectable. So those who know him respect him as a man. In other words, so if they make you an elder and your coworkers go, huh? You're an elder? Right? Okay. How are they going to respond to that or react to that? Are they going to think, yeah, that makes sense. I can see that. Or they're going to go, really?
They don't know. They start laughing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, what's his reputation in the community? What do his neighbors think? Not that we're going to go interview everybody's neighbors necessarily, but those are the kinds of things that you're trying to discern or discover. Let's see, and that could just references, just as far as people have known him a while, long time, that sort of thing. And usually, if the person's been in the church for a long time, then the church knows him, and the church can testify to whether or not he's that kind of person. Then, not a drunkard. Alcohol does not have mastery over his life. It doesn't say that he never touches it. It just says he's not a drunkard, right? Now, some churches have policies about that, and Mercy Hill Church has a policy about that. I know that. I've been told everyone in the pastoral staff or leadership, they don't forbid it with their members, but they do say to their leadership not to touch it. But that it doesn't have mastery. He's not, we're not finding him sauced, every Saturday night or something, and whatever.
How do you feel about the public? Because I know our PCA church in Indiana, among the elders, we just had an agreement that we would not drink in public. If we want to have beer at home, fine. We would not go in a restaurant.
We go in a restaurant and do it.
Have other people see us.
Right.
Which I kind of thought was a cool idea, but I don't think we can't justify that anywhere. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of conscience. I think you got to know your town. I can see how either way, there could be pros and cons either way.
Yeah.
So I think you got to just kind of say, okay, it's just a matter of conscience. There was a point in time where I was uncomfortable with public,
Yeah.
But I mean, my
gotta-
conscience is clear now on that issue. So. But
if you do something that the weaker will view
right,
and make them stumble, then you shouldn't do it, right?
Absolutely, right.
So I think
right. That's why I said you got to know like your community, the people you're around. You got to be sensitive to that. I mean,
I think there has to be a qualifier even with that though, and that has to be a reasonable person.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if you look at what's happened in our culture with the PC correct, where every little thing is somebody's got, you've got privilege or you've got, this or that, the other, and it's impossible to not offend somebody somewhere.
Yep.
And so I think that you have to have a reasonableness about it, and at the same time we are called to be sensitive.
Sure.
And so I'm not saying that as being a flagrant violator. I don't care what you think. I'm not saying that at all. I'm definitely not saying that at all. My stepmom would be just absolutely freak out if she knew that I had a beer in my refrigerator.
Right. Right.
Because she's just that strong.
Yeah.
On it, so.
Right.
I'm going to throw in there though, while you're, that any other drug doesn't have a mastery over your life, including
right.
opioids and
Yep.
and
Right.
might as well throw,
Marijuana.
cigarettes in there. I mean, can you lay it down, or does it have mastery over you?
Right.
And I know that's going to really make some people. Okay, so you're not qualified to be an elder, or or hold that office.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's a hard one, because it's hard to put down once you've picked it up. But then
Yeah.
so are all these other things too.
Right. Right.
At the same time, Spurgeon loved a good cigar,
But he could put it down.
I don't think that it had mastery over him.
Exactly.
So-
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, yeah. There's a debate on marijuana. We did talk about that, I think, a little bit in the other class that came up. And it does in the Westminster Confession class. There was a video, actually. One of the video links was a discussion at John MacArthur's church at one of the conferences, the G3 conference, I guess.
Really?
Yeah, and they were discussing. So it was what's the guy from Wretched? I forget his name. You know what I'm talking about. He was doing the question and answer part. Yeah, I forget his name, and then he goes, "Is it wrong to smoke marijuana? Yes or no?" That's pretty much how he put it. And everyone laughs. It's
Yeah.
kind of comical, but
I would assume
Yeah.
yes, it is wrong.
yeah, it's mind altering. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. You're altering your mind, and you can't say you're sober minded. Just sitting down one time. And so there's it could go into. I don't want to go into all that, but I think that's relevant too. Yeah, and wasn't there a guy who applied for this job who? I seem to remember hearing about that. There was one guy who actually said he did, who applied for the position.
Who's still smoking?
I thought you told me about that. Yeah.
Who's still smoking dope currently?
Well, he was okay with it. I think he did on occasion. Yeah. Yeah. Apparently. Yeah. Somehow that came out. I remember hearing about that.
That's not been what I've
Just
had.
with-
Yeah, I thought it was you who told me that. Maybe not. Maybe it was someone else. Maybe it was one of the other members of the committee that told me that.
Episcopal church down the road that he can go.
Yeah, that's right. They accept everything. Yeah, that's right. But yeah, I think you're right. That certainly, as far as not being a drunkard, that does apply to that as well. So any kind of substance that's controlling you, that sort of thing. Not violent, but gentle. So does he have a temper? Does he get angry easy? Short fuse? And does that anger turn violent? Does he hurt people? Has he done that? Is he prone to that? Is he prone to hurting people? Now it could have been in your past. You might have been that way, and you're not anymore. Of course. But and then let's see. Not a lover of money. I think that has. You look at, whether or not he's generous. Does he give to the church? Does he give to missions? Does he give to the poor? Does he have an open hand to the poor? Is he willing to put himself out, to help someone else? That sort of thing.
Does he cheat on his taxes?
Does he cheat on his taxes? Right. So we have to turn all your tax returns in? No.
He's working on that.
Yeah.
It's kind of fresh.
Looking for some loopholes?
David, only you revelations about your life.
Yeah.
It's mostly on that side of the road.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. All the Daves over here are in trouble.
Hey, whoa, I haven't said nothing.
No.
Okay, leave me out of whatever. The Daves are in trouble. I'm Dave.
That's right. You did bring me up to marijuana. That's
ID
right.
on the end.
Yeah. Oh, okay. You're going David. Okay.
No, I've never heard it talked about, so it's very
It was
interesting.
a good video.
Search his
You
car.
can give it-
Oh yeah. You can find it. You just Yep.
I mean, I've seen what it does to
There's
people.
hope for
So
everyone.
Sure.
it's
It's
once is no. You
Yeah.
shouldn't. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
no bueno.
Yeah. It really can't be done in moderation. It's like
It can't.
the whole reason you do it is so that you get into an altered state of mind.
Right.
It's the whole purpose of it is
If you're drinking to get
psychologically
drunk.
it's a crutch to even
yeah.
cope with things where you
Right.
can cope with them with God and the
Right.
Word.
It's a
And
false
find
messiah. Yeah.
Salvation
That's right.
that way instead of I've just seen it so many
Yeah.
times, even in moderation and just a little bit. It's very humanistic.
Yeah, I agree.
life's exciting enough without that stuff.
There it is. That
Yeah.
subsiding
Yeah.
perks of the subject.
Yeah. So manage his household well. So look at his home life. Yeah. How he treats his wife. Of course, we've already kind of dealt with that already. His kids as well. Is he a tyrant? Or is he a pushover? Is he aloof? Is he, just those things have to be looked at, and Paul makes a big deal about that because that's going to tell you about how he's going to be in the church. So, like when Jesus said, "Don't lord over," okay, that would tyrant. That's out, right? Because that's what that is. However, at the same time, he can't be a pushover either, right? He can't just be like, whatever you want to do, just let the kids eat candy all they want or run wild in the streets. If that's happening, then obviously he's not going to be much of a defense against the wolves that show up in the church. Or when someone falls into sin, being able to correct them and discipline them. He's not going to have the ability to do that. He won't have the spine for that. So there's a really important that he's balanced in those ways. And does he shepherd his children? Does he model faith and repentance to them? Do his kids submit to him out of respect and admiration? What's his relationship with his kids? Is he in control of the home, or are they in control of the home? You know what I'm talking about, right? You've seen that, where it's like, okay, these kids rule the home. They are in charge, because they get everything they want. All they have to do is pitch a fit, and mom and dad cave in. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it. I've seen it. And dealt with the tension of that too, of wanting just to keep peace. Sometimes you don't want to be seen as the bad guy. But again, we must be careful not to set this as an absolute expectation, because let's face it, no father can control the hearts of his kids, right? In our church in Maryland, it was one of the elders there. His son had gotten arrested for stealing a CD from Best Buy, and there were calls for him to step down because it shows that he was not ruling his household well because his son had gotten arrested. But he handled it right. The way he dealt with it with his son was absolutely dead on. He didn't excuse it. He dealt very sternly with him. I think, and even the other elders seem to agree that he did, but there were some people really upset that he should not be an elder because his son got arrested. Yeah, because obviously he's disqualified based on this. So you start making it an absolute rule like that, you're going to find plenty of reasons to disqualify man. Plenty. I've got things, there's parenting challenges that I've got that I'm still trying to figure out. Yes, yeah. And no one asked my opinion about the cat, so obviously I'm not ruling my household very well because I didn't have any say in the cat. So it just sort of showed up one day. We got a cat. Oh, okay.
They do that.
Cats.
I wish a dog would.
A dog.
I know
dogs do
cats
too.
that.
Yeah.
I've never seen dogs.
Don't you read that? 3:8. No cats in the household.
That's right. Yeah, you must not have a cat.
It's
Right.
definitely not managing the household well. When a cat sneaks in.
Well, it's probably because they knew I would have been like, no, and then is Davey a tyrant now? He won't let them have a cat. So
Choose your battles, Dave.
yeah, it's choose your battles.
Now
Exactly.
wait,
There you
today
have
I see a picture of you snuggled with the cat.
Oh.
it. No, that won't happen.
Yeah.
Oh man,
It's coming.
I like the cat. I'm just not a cat
Never
person.
say no.
Just not a cat
You
person.
won't curl up right next to your beard.
That's right.
No.
They do that.
I know he will. He will go flying across the room if he does that. I can tell you that. That will not happen. It won't last very long. I'll tell you that.
There we go.
Anyway, not a recent convert.
Thank you, Walt. I digress. Not a recent convert. So why is that important? Why is that so important? Because if he's a recent convert, he can become puffed up, right? He says it right there. Why? Right? Right. Okay. But he also hasn't really learned humility. He hasn't reached a certain point in humility that he needs to reach as well. And I can tell you, me and David and Rob, whenever we've had to do discipline, how humbling that is, how hard that is, how difficult it is to confront people because we're talking to people about their sin, and we're going, I'm not better than this person. I'm not, It's very humbling. You got to be aware of your own sin, and your need and your dependence on Christ and the power of the Holy Spirit. And if you're a new convert, you haven't grown in those areas yet. Very easy to get puffed up. I got knowledge, and then that's how they start lording over people, pretty easily. Were you saying something?
I'm in agreement with you, brother.
Oh,
I know I'm a big
I know.
sinner, and we have the same.
Yeah.
We're together on that. I
Yeah.
feel really awkward.
yeah.
telling people
Who am
that-
I to say
Yeah.
this? Yeah,
That's
it's
right.
really,
And
it's a very
I
humble and
stand
sober.
on-
Yeah,
And just since we're talking about
yeah,
elders and what, and I stand on the fact that I know I'm called to do it.
Yep.
And I'm commanded to do it. It's not because of my superiority or it's only because it's the role
right,
that I've been put in.
Right.
It's not
Right.
because I think that I have any higher standing, moral superiority or
Right.
perfection,
Yeah.
or that I've reached a higher plane or anything
Yeah.
like that.
yeah, yeah,
It's,
yeah. Kind of like when I quoted one of my old pastors last week. We don't feel good at what we're called to do, but we feel called to do it.
yeah, exactly, right.
Yeah,
Like, a young convert wouldn't be discipled very long either. I
right,
mean, like, everything here in 1 Timothy 3, the qualifications are all things that are in Scripture that Jesus taught and Paul.
mm-hmm.
And it's a Christian. It's a description of a Christian person, right?
That's
The
right.
only thing that's kind of like a little bit different is able to teach here.
Mm-hmm.
Titus able to give instruction. Not everybody can actually do that right away, but
Right.
it still
That's right.
says to do that in the Great Commission. Teach.
Yeah, teach and preserve everything I've commanded you. Right,
So,
right,
Mhm.
right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just,
That's right.
Yep. There's different levels of teaching too. As far as what can a new convert teach somebody something about Jesus? Yeah, sure.
yes.
You say, hey, he's the way, the truth, and life. He's teaching them, right? So he can share the gospel, and that is teaching. But of course, what Paul means here is being able to take them deeper, to explain and expound the scriptures. It's kind of
They're not ready.
explain broader points of theology and things. Right? They're not ready for that. They just haven't grown in their knowledge. So they haven't grown in knowledge, they haven't grown in wisdom, they haven't grown in their maturity, humility. I mean, these are all things that come with time. So they have to. Even Paul didn't jump right into being, doing the apostolic work. Right?
Mhm.
He went away for a few years.
Right.
So yeah, he didn't even jump right in. They had to go get him.
Well, if you're also a new convert, then, it hasn't really been all that long since you changed. And there might be a lot of people in your life who knew you just a couple of weeks ago.
Right? Just a couple weeks ago, he was like
And,
drunk out of his mind,
And
and
you're-
now he's, oh yeah, right, right. There's got to be a track record of showing change. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah,
Jonathan
Yeah.
Jones, he tells a story when he was saved. He said that he professed Christ and everything, and his pastor said, "We'll see what you got in 6 months," and it made him mad. And he said, he was like, "Don't you get it?" And he was, just tripped his trigger immediately like that. And
yeah,
then,
yeah.
And then he repented.
Ah,
Again.
right.
It was probably his first act of repentance
Yeah.
after a Christian was then acknowledging that that something simple like that can really
Yeah.
torque him, And,
Yeah.
and he but that made an impact in his life,
Right.
Because it's the perseverance
Right.
that proves that you are one.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
is-
Yeah.
is those who persevere to the end.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. That's right. Okay, let's see. How he's viewed by outsiders, we kind of talked about already. Those outside of the church, that is, how would they say that he practices what he preaches, or would they say he's a hypocrite? Because sometimes people tend to be different people, different environments, and they go to work, they're one person. They come home, they're a different person. They go to church, they're a different person. That sort of thing.
Will they recognize you as being a Christian?
Right. Yeah.
Period. I mean, in work.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
They recognize you.
Mhm. And then Paul doesn't mention it here, but he does in Titus 1:8, hospitable. Now, this could be categorized as a gift also, because we'll get into that later. But generally speaking, okay, he should be making strides to be hospitable, even if he's not. But what does it mean to be hospitable? The word is made up of two Greek words, philo, or phileo, love, and xenos, where we get xenophobes, we're afraid of strangers, right? So love for strangers, love for aliens.
Just love for everybody.
Right. Yeah, love for everybody. Love for your neighbor, whoever that might be, right? You know, the good Samaritan, right?
Loves people.
Right. So Hebrews 13:2, do not neglect to show hospitality, I can't talk tonight, to strangers. Same word there. For thereby some have entertained angels unawares. So he welcomes strangers. That's the question. Is he welcoming to strangers? Does he care for people's needs? Is he protective of his guests? Because hospitality, it's not just, here's a sandwich, but it's even protecting, protecting our guests.
Kind of applies to us as a body on Sundays when other people come in. How
Yes.
do we treat them?
Right.
That's
That's right. Yeah.
a big impact.
That's right. Right. Yeah. As a church, we are to be hospitable in that way. Right. And being willing to, be put out. It's funny because I filled in for David set free this past week on Monday, and I taught 3 John, and that came up. Hospitality was a big part of, of that book, because John's talking about how this one guy Diotrephes is, he doesn't recognize anybody's authority. He's not welcoming people, not welcoming these traveling missionaries, but Demetrius, the other guy, there's 2 examples, Diotrephes, Demetrius. Demetrius is very hospitable, very caring, very, he supports the needs of others, and so he's a great example. So he's held out as an example. So this is like the second time this has come up just this week, but the Good Samaritan, I think, is a really good example of what we're talking about. I mean, love your neighbor as yourself. That's kind of the heart of hospitality, right? In part. So, but I think even beyond that, the question, I think, is, does he love people? Because if he does, he will demonstrate hospitality. At our previous church, when they were examining the guys who became elders at that church, when they were about to particularize and everything, this one, they had a borrowed session. Okay, they had elders they borrowed from other churches who came and were sort of like a temporary session for that church. And that was the session tasked with interviewing these guys. And one guy, he looks at one fellow who's an elder candidate. He says, and his name is Michael. He said, "Michael, do you love people?" Yeah, I think so. He wasn't sure how to answer the question. Very simple question, very relevant question. Do you love people? And we'll get into this a little more next week, but I have just seen too many men get into positions of eldership who don't love people. Yeah, you go, how are you in this position if you don't love people? I don't like people. And, it's just very strange. It really shouldn't be that way. Not to say they couldn't work on that, and they should, but that should have been brought up. Maybe it was. I don't know. But most elders I've seen do love people. They do care about people. They are hospitable and caring and nurturing and, helpful to others. So, and then we're almost done here. Everyone's yawning. Don't fall asleep yet. We're almost done. So, BCO has some good things to say. BCO 8:1, the office of elder is one of dignity and usefulness. The man who fills it has in Scripture different titles expressive of his various duties. As he has the oversight of the flock of Christ, he is termed bishop or pastor. As it is his duty to be spiritually fruitful, dignified, and prudent, an example to the flock, and to govern well in the house and kingdom of Christ, he's termed presbyter or elder. As he expounds the word and by sound doctrine both exhorts and convinces the gainsayer, he is termed teacher. These titles do not indicate different grades of office, but all describe one and the same office. So there's different kind of, I guess you could say, hats to the office of elder, right? As far as being, teacher, preacher, shepherd, that sort of thing. These are all, pastor, right? These are all words that pertain to that office. He that fills this office should possess a competency of human learning and be blameless in life, sound in the faith, and apt to teach. Did we talk about that? Apt to teach?
No.
We didn't, did we? Did we miss it? Did I miss it? Just realized I don't think we talked about it.
I don't even see it in.
Oh, I know why. You know why? Because we're going to talk about it next week. I looked at the requirements, but then also looked at the giftings. So I kind of split them up a little bit. That's right. I forgot. So we'll get into that next time. I want to talk about that specifically. That's why. So he should be apt to teach. He should exhibit a sobriety and holiness of life, becoming of the gospel. He should rule his household well and should have a good report of them that are outside of the church. Everything we just discussed, really, but it's just the way the BCO puts it. And now someone might be saying, well, none of this describes me, so I will not be here next week. Right? Yeah. But not so fast, right? So Paul's not giving us a description of a super Christian, as I said at the start, but the goal that every Christian should be striving to reach. It is interesting, though, that even though we talked about not being a recent convert, right? Acts 14:23, Paul and Barnabas went back to Lystra and Iconium and appointed elders, probably, at the most a year, but probably more like, probably less than that, really, and appoint elders. Now these men could have been Jews who knew the word, right? But what they did was they went and found the most mature of all of them and appointed them as elders. That's what they were doing because it was so important. Certainly, these men had not reached the level of sanctification and godliness described here, but the men who had demonstrated the most growth in sanctification and seemed to be headed in that direction were put in those positions. The idea is not to put perfect and sinless men in these positions, but men who are faithfully growing and pursuing Christ in their lives so that they can become examples to the flock. That's really what you're looking for. You're looking for people who are growing, people who are hungry, and we'll get into this a little more about apt to teach. I think part of being apt to teach is being teachable. Can you learn from others? Right? That's a very important part of it. Because if you can't learn from others, then you're not really in a position to teach yet. Right? So that's those are important things. Anyways, so that's all I got for tonight. So questions?